All right, welcome back. We are once again joined by Lieutenant Travis Theriot with the Houma Police Department. He's also the Chief of Detectives, and good to have you back with Mardi Gras season. We're always talking about incidents, and I want to just say before we go into the incidents, you hear about locations, you hear about ballrooms, and I don't want to put all that blame on the ballrooms or the locations because there's so many people drinking and doing different things that sometimes if something happens at Joe's Corral, it's not always Joe that caused the problem. So keep this in mind when we're talking about it. But we had an incident downtown that got pretty serious.
Right. The location, I think everybody will be able to figure out, when you describe what happened. But it was post-parade after the Friday night parade after Hercules. And that's, earlier we were talking about during the parade, after the parade. These were all post-parade. So the parade was actually over. Mm-hmm. Last float was past Town Hall. Still had somewhat of just people lingering around, walking around and talking. Anybody that's been downtown will see where people come in and start cleaning up the beads, and the barricades were all gone by this point. And there was an individual that was walking down the stairs, which was the victim, and they had the suspect was walking up the stairs, and there was an exchange of words, and at that point in time, the suspect punched him. Victim flies down the stairs, hits his head, and whenever he hits the ground, he's unconscious. So the victim actually landed on top of his other friend, and so the suspect goes downstairs and actually gets on top of him and brutally just beats him, and starts beating the victim on the ground as well. Police officers came up and tried pulling him off. He was able to break away from the cops, got back on top of him, and continued beating him. And there were no weapons involved, but it was a brutal.
And that's another thing. Sometimes the assailant breaks away from the police officer, which tells me this person is a pretty big person.
Yes, yeah. And eventually, we got some other cops that came up, and they were able to take him into custody without incident. And pretty lucky. His injuries, we consulted with the ambulance service and the hospital, and they pretty much confirmed that it was definitely life-threatening injuries that he was dealing with. So at the time, that's when we decided to go with attempted second-degree murder. And
he was surprised he was arrested for that, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. He assumed, hey, this was Mardi Gras, this was going to be a fight. Well, no, that's not really how we can handle things. We, beforehand, leading into this, we take pride in a safe, family-oriented Mardi Gras, and this doesn't represent what we wanted our parades.
And that's just a warning shot across the bow for everybody out there. When you get involved in these fights, sometimes and alcohol takes over, it can go from less serious to real serious real quick.
Yeah. So if just because there's only fists involved, but your end result is someone in intensive care on an event, you're going to get charged accordingly, regardless of what the season is.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk about another release that y'all sent out. And once again, folks, we've told y'all before, we only go by press releases from law enforcement. We don't get any information on Facebook and all these other. If the police bring it to us or an agency brings it to us, that's when we talk about it. They had an incident at the location of Polk in Maine.
That's right. So Polk in Maine, and both these incidents were on the parade route where it passes. Polk in Maine, this was actually over an hour after the officers were relieved of duty from that area, and it was concluded in that area. And there was two groups of individuals, I guess, that came back, and they started arguing with each other, and then gunfire erupted between the two groups. And as a result, whenever we responded to the gunfire, we pull up and probably spread out over, the crime scene was spread out over a block. And we had 3 victims that were suffering from gunshot wounds. 2 of them were standing off in the distance, and the other one was in a field when we found him.
You've been doing this a long time, Travis. Is it, maybe it just seems like it escalates, but is it more in this area now, or is it just pretty typical?
You know, one thing you're seeing more of, if you go back to when I started in law enforcement, you know, almost 24 years ago, the change is the amount of weapons on the street. You know, you didn't really find juveniles. I mean, you found them, but it wasn't like it is today. You did not have this younger generation carrying guns like they do now. And, you know, a lot of these guns are coming from car burglaries, and that's how they get them, because a kid can't go into a store and buy a gun,
Right.
you know, and you don't see even, they can't steal them, so it's only one place they can be getting them from, you know, they're stealing them from somewhere.
And I guess we've said it so many times before, really think, if you're a juvenile, just sit down and think sometimes about what the end result will be. You may not be seeing daylight for a long, long time when you get in these situations, but moving forward, we've got about a minute left. Any advice for the?
Yeah,
audience?
and another thing, talking about juveniles, they need to realize if it's a violent act and they take someone's life, that does not mean that they cannot be tried as an adult if the district attorney chooses to. So,
Yep, that's a good point, no
Yeah.
doubt about it. And got a few more parades to go. Keep your head about you. Alcohol sometimes can make people smile really good and have a fun time, but in other people, it can make them have demons. So
yeah.
you know
So-
who you are, you know your limitations.
If you come to the parade, be patient. Just because somebody tells you or your loved one something that you don't like, try and walk away. You know, there's no reason to start fighting. And
Yeah, sometimes they'll say stuff about the girlfriend, and the
Yeah.
other one will just get crazy. And anyway, thank you, Travis. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back with more.